Artificial intelligence is taken off, isn't it? And we're starting to see it in lots and lots of different realms, and we're starting to see it more in education too. And the more that we learn about it, the more that we play with ChatGPT and with Bard and with Bing and with Dolly and Midjourney and all the other AI tools, and if I just named a bunch of tools you're not familiar with, that's okay. Don't worry, you're still in a good place. But the more that we play with some of the AI tools, we start to see the possibilities, but we also start to see some of the things that we need to get right for the classroom and for our schools. And so as we start to think about those things, there are certain conversations that we need to have. I really believe that one of the best things that we can do right off the bat at the beginning of a new school year, or really whenever we start to try to tackle all of this artificial intelligence stuff, is to have conversations. Conversations with our students about what we expect and what they should be doing. Conversations with our colleagues, with fellow teachers about how this all fits in the classroom and what we should be doing. Conversations with school leaders and administrators about policies and about how we do this from the top down. Conversations even with the community and with parents too. So the big question you might be asking then is, what kind of conversation should we be having? So in tonight's webinar, I'm going to be sharing with you 6 conversations that I think that we need to be having as schools about artificial intelligence on a wide range of topics. My name's Matt Miller. I'm the author of Ditch That Textbook, also the author of AI for Educators, my brand new book that's kind of like a primer for educators about artificial intelligence, to kind of catch you up to speed and get you an idea of what some of the implications are related to the classroom. And I'm excited to get to have this conversation with you. It's been so nice to see so many of you checking in the comments already. We've got people from all over the world in this live stream, from a variety of different countries, all the way down to my home state here of Indiana. And so I'm excited to see so many of you here. So if you haven't gotten a chance to, feel free to check in and let us know who you are and where you're from and what you do, just so we can say hello. So for instance, I'm going to check in real quick and say hello to Lynn from Chester Springs, Pennsylvania. We've also got Dan from Oakland, California. Good to see you as well. Pam is here from New South Wales and Australia. Looking forward to learning more about AI like all the rest of us. There's Becky Keene from Seattle, Washington. Good to see her. A familiar face, as well as Kristen from Massachusetts, another familiar face. Good to see both of you. Paul is here from Washington. There's Rochelle, my friend, checking in as well. Anne is here from Alabama, from Huntsville, Alabama. It's good to see you, as well as Jenny from New Zealand. We've got Scott. He says, love this from Sherry Turkle. We expect more from technology and less from each other. That's a quote that I mentioned in my book. So Scott, thanks so much for dropping that in there. Liliana is here from Colombia, and it just goes on and on and on from there. So if you haven't gotten a chance to check in, would love to see you check in the comments. I'm also seeing Claudia is here from Mexico City, and Maria is here from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Bienvenidos. Good to see all of you in this webinar. So like I said, 6 AI conversations that every school should be having, at least in my opinion. And so what I'd love for you to do is, as I bring these conversations up, if you have thoughts on them, or if you have questions, or if you want to throw something in, please throw that into the chat. And I'll be pulling in some of those comments. And then, of course, you get to read everybody else's stuff, and we get to kind of like benefit from the group think on all of this that everybody has to say. So 6 AI conversations that every school should have. We ready to get started? All right, let's do this. By the way, I don't know if you can see this on the YouTube live stream, but right now, as of this moment, we have 142 people joining us on this live stream as of this moment, which is super exciting for me. Okay, so let's get started and let's dive right into our very first conversation that we need to have. And that is just basically, what is artificial intelligence? What can it do and what can't it do? Because I've found that in education, a lot of times whenever we have a conversation about just about anything, sometimes we start to talk about, we think we're talking about the same thing, but we're actually talking about very different things. And so it's good to make sure that everybody is on board and understands kind of what we're talking about, what some of the key definitions are when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to the technology that makes it up and how it works, and what artificial intelligence can do right now, and of course, what it can't do. So let me ask you in the comments, and I'm going to be watching this. If somebody asked you these questions, as far as what you've learned, if you have something to share, what is artificial intelligence? What can it do? What can't it do? And so while you're typing that, let me share with you a couple of things that I know to be about artificial intelligence. First of all, things to know about artificial intelligence. Number one, it's basically computers and machines doing things that a human normally would. And so, really, whenever we think as humans, we are drawing upon our life experiences. We're drawing upon data and information that we have acquired. And we work through those thoughts in a logical way to come to a conclusion. It's sort of a algorithmic, formulaic way of thinking. And when you start doing things in an algorithmic, formulaic way, computers can start to pick up on it. And so really, that's all that artificial intelligence is doing. It's also based on a data set. Artificial intelligence is based on a data set, and it trains itself on that data set. So think about it this way. Let's use ChatGPT as an example. By the way, if you're not familiar with ChatGPT at this point, it is an artificial intelligence assistant that you can ask questions to, and it'll answer your questions, and it'll create like text-based things for you. It works off of a data set, and that data set has tons and tons and tons of information in it. Information pulled from the web, information pulled from books, pulled from all sorts of published resources. Basically, everything they could get their hands on to throw into that data set, that's the information that it draws from. And then what for instance, ChatGPT has done is it has trained itself on that data set. It's looking for, and somebody just said this, Paul nailed it right here, looks for patterns and makes generalizations. That's what it's trying to do, right? It's looking at all of this information and figuring out how humans think and how humans communicate based on what's in its data set. It's also important to know that no data set is fully complete, but we're going to get to that in a minute. What else have we got? Number 3, it can create things. If you hear that term generative AI, that's what this is really all about. Generative AI generates things, can create things. ChatGPT, for instance, can create things out of text. You've got others that are like image-based artificial intelligence. Those are also generative AI because they're generating images. They can generate videos. I mean, the sky's the limit. And it can also do tasks for us as well. So if we ask it to do something, a lot of times it's able to do it. Next, it learns and improves with practice. If you've played with ChatGPT at this point and you think, oh, that's so nice of them to make ChatGPT available for free so that we can all use it. Guess what? They need you as much as we need them because they need it to help train the model, continue to train the AI. So every interaction that it has with humans, it learns something from it and it improves based on it. And then finally, it studies human language to know how to interact with us. That's like natural language processing, NLP. It looks at the way that humans interact with each other and it learns how it thinks. And again, it does it based off of probabilities. It does it based on how it thinks that a human would respond, training off of other people's interactions. And then it's also been around a long time before ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence is not a brand new thing. And artificial intelligence did not just start based on ChatGPT. In fact, someone up here, I'm trying to catch the comment. Somebody said earlier that it's more than just ChatGPT. There it is. It was Judy. Judy says AI is more than ChatGPT. That's just kind of like the program that we've gotten most familiar with in recent months. But I mean, Amazon has used artificial intelligence for a long, long time to to suggest products based on other things that we've bought and the things that we've looked at. A lot of your assistants like Siri and Alexa and everything use artificial intelligence. Even things like Grammarly and Spell Check and Grammar Check all run off of artificial intelligence as well. So what else? What else is there that we can determine about artificial intelligence based on the comments here? Lori says it cannot tell if the statements are true or false. It assumes all true facts. That's a good point, that all of the things that are thrown into the data set, it doesn't know, it's not able to determine whether those things are true or false or not. They're just, part of the data set. For instance, in ChatGPT's data set are lots of blogs created on Blogger. You know who creates blogs on Blogger and puts the information in them? People like you and me. Not necessarily people who have our best interest at heart, which means that there might be some inaccurate information. There might be biased information. Again, we're going to get to that in a little bit. Wendy says ChatGPT equals huge time saver. Yes, and we're going to get to that a little bit more just in a little bit. And Glenn follows up, it can help teachers save time, and that is something that all teachers need. I totally agree with that. Aaron says AI can perform several tasks, but cannot generate freely and create. It still needs us to do that, right? It's response-oriented entity that draws from what it knows to respond to your request. Yeah, that's an important thing as well. And then Jill says AI can help you with facts and it can compare. So yeah, those are some of the things that we know to be true about about ChatGPT. And then Larry throws in HAL from 2001: Space Odyssey. It's funny because at the beginning of my book, AI for Educators, I ask, when you hear the term artificial intelligence, what does it make you think of? And I ask, is it like HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey? You got to be of a certain age to know really what we're talking about here. To me, it was also Rosie the Robot from the Jetsons. Some people would look at the Terminator movies and think about Skynet, which, has very destructive things that it wants to do with artificial intelligence. So, yeah, all of these things. Yeah, Larry adds the robot from the TV show Lost in Space. So, and then Michael also adds AI does not have general intelligence yet. Yeah, that's true. There's artificial intelligence and there's artificial general intelligence where AI starts to be, for lack of a better term, as smart as humans or able to do things on the same level as humans. But obviously we're not there yet. Okay. So that's number one. What is artificial intelligence? What can it do? What can't it do? I will also throw in there that the math teachers especially seem to be having a field day with this because it's not very good at math yet. You throw in some, story problems or word problems or even just basic math problems, and it still doesn't get it right yet. So, again, there's good reason for students knowing how to do mathematical calculations themselves in a wide variety of different ways. And Paul also says, as time goes on, I bet we become pickier about the data sets that the tools use. Yes, the smarter we become, the pickier we probably become on which tools we use because they have better and better data sets. Let's go on to number 2. How will teaching and learning change as AI expands? And if you're dropping things into the chat, I'd like to hear some of your examples of this, of how teaching and learning have changed for you as AI has already expanded. I've already started to see, lots of teachers bringing AI in to help them as teachers, as was mentioned earlier, to save us time. But it can also serve as a valuable resource and can also help us create things as well. But we're going to get into that a little bit more as time goes on. Here's one thing that I'd like you to consider. At some point, we're going to have to reckon with the fact that AI will have touched all student work. And this sounds a little bit creepy to some of us and a little bit fantastical maybe, but there's probably some truth to it. If you think about it, right now, I found that in lots of schools, lots of teachers that I've talked about, not everybody really knows about what ChatGPT and what some of these AI models are able to do. And so it's not totally widespread yet. which is kind of great because it does buy us some time to figure out what's going on. But as it starts to become more and more mainstream and people start to figure out what they can do with it, start to realize that students may have run a variety of different things, through some version of artificial intelligence. I mean, that day is basically coming. So it's something that we start to ask ourselves, how can I adjust what I do in the classroom so that student thinking is preserved and so that academic integrity is preserved, even if artificial intelligence has touched student work in some way? Now, if we think back not that long ago, it was sort of weird for us to think that spell check and grammar check would have touched student work. Do you remember those days? Back when, especially when grammar check started to get thrown into, tools like Microsoft Word and Google Docs and everything. And we started to go, oh, no, I don't like this. I want students to be able to grammar check their own stuff. I don't want them to just be able to click a button. And that was what, like 10 years ago or something? I'm just guessing here. But now, today, it's commonplace. In fact, a lot of times we ask students before they turn in work, have you run it through grammar check and have you run it through spell check yet? Because it's become a normal part of our lives. I think with a lot of things, we can look back to some big kind of like innovative disruptions that have hit and how they've become mainstream or how we've started to deal with them in schools. As an example of what we can do here. And a lot of people talk about the calculator. There's that whole thing about, how often did the math teachers of the past go, oh, you're going to have to know how to do that by hand on paper because you're not going to be able to carry around a calculator all the time. And now today we're like, guess what? That's what we've got in our pocket. We've got a supercomputer in our pocket all the time. And so then what happened with math instruction as calculators started to come along and started to get more and more commonplace? Well, we spent less time in the classroom doing hand calculations of math. And when the calculator started doing those things, it freed up the time and the mind space and the instructional ability to get to higher levels of math. And so then when we weren't spending as much time doing all those things by hand, it gave us more time to do more and more things, which actually brings me to my next point, is that I think artificial intelligence is going to follow a similar pattern, kind of like the way that it did with the calculator, kind of like it did with lots of, with lots of other innovations. I really think it's going to be like the tide that raises all ships. And so think about it. With math instruction, the calculator comes in and it frees up some mind space and some time for us to be able to get to the next thing. And then what happens? The level of instruction starts to go up. We're able to cover more, not because we're covering things fast and we're just getting through the content, but because students can understand it. We're able to cover more because we've sort of outsourced some of those basic calculations. Now, here comes artificial intelligence. And let's start to think, like, what is it that artificial intelligence is going to start outsourcing a little bit so that we can level things up? I hear people saying that a lot of the AI assistants that we have out there, like ChatGPT, are going to create our first draft for us of lots of things. And so then it'll be incumbent upon us to see if that first draft does what we need it to do. And then for us to be able to adjust it and change it and make it into what feels like our voice, or to be able to make sure that it's accurate, or to make sure that it's suitable for the audience that it's giving to. And then once we have that, then we can take that draft and we can use it ourselves. And when that starts to become more and more commonplace, think about, if we're not spending as much time on some of those basic things, what is it that we'll be able to level up and do next? So, the tide that raises all ships, as it continues to become more and more mainstream and we start to think about what we're able to do with it, it's like, what is this going to free us up to be able to do more of? Amanda's getting ahead of me a little bit, which is so true. It learns what humans input, so implicitly biased, just like all of us. Yep, we're going to get to that in just a little bit. Timo asks, would it then mean that those who cannot use it will be left behind, kind of like the AI divide? I really believe the answer to that is yes. And I think we're going to get to that also in a little. Oh man, yeah, it's like you all are reading my notes here. We're kind of thinking about some of the similar stuff, which is great. I really think that if students don't get an opportunity to use artificial intelligence, or at bare minimum, they don't get a chance to see teachers modeling it and talking about responsible and ethical use, when they get out into the real world, or even when they advance into college or into other areas of their life, if they don't know how to use it as an effective tool, then there's going to be, there's an equity issue when it comes to that, right? And so, let's see, what else have we got? Flipping back through the comments here, Angie says, to solve everyday problems, my son works in IT. He had a problem his department was not able to solve. So what did he do? He asked ChatGPT and it provided them with a solution. It solved, in that case, the unsolvable, because it's able to do all of these, all of this analysis of this huge data set and be able to come to discoveries about it that we just can't do ourselves. Here's another question that we're going to get into in a little bit. John Patrick asks, curious about anyone who gives assignments that require original writing. How will we verify authenticity, or do we just need to rethink how we assess writing skills altogether? I love how there's that duality in the questions that you have there. How do we verify authenticity, or do we need to just rethink? Yeah, we're going to get to that in a little bit, but I really think that the more that AI starts to assimilate itself, that AI rough draft, that AI first draft is going to become more and more commonplace. And then it's going to be incumbent on us to see, what do we do with that going forward? So in that case, it's a little more towards the second side of your question instead of the first. That's a great question, I think. Christine says, AI will handle drafts, initial research, and bump our thinking forward. Creativity, compassion, and curiosity will become humanity's most valuable skills. Christine is using that important word that I keep using when I talk about artificial intelligence, humanity. Like, what is it that makes us special as humans that, that we can kind of like double down on? All right, so to wrap this question up, here's some things. Remember, we were saying these are our 6 AI conversations that every school needs to have. Here's some things that you can discuss if you want to talk to students or your colleagues and all of that. For instance, how does the way that students might use AI now impact the outcomes that we want them to have with their classwork? And then will it change as AI evolves? So like, how do we think students are going to use it now? And then do we need to adjust that classwork so that we can get what we need out of our students and have them to develop the skills and have the experiences so that they can become the humans that they need to be? That's one. What assignments or activities will need an upgrade as AI starts to become more and more mainstream? Or maybe just an adjustment or a complete overhaul? And then finally, do our activities promote skills that we believe to be less likely to be outsourced by artificial intelligence? So like, we have to take a good, honest, hard look at what we do in the classroom and say, am I promoting skills that are going to become sort of obsolete? Like, we've got to take that look into the future and figure out, what are kids going to need in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? It's hard to look into the future, but if we learn a little bit about artificial intelligence, we can start to see where some of this is heading. And we're starting to have existential questions about humanity and what it means to be a human in the chat, and I am here for it. I love it. Jill says, I hope humanity shares feelings. That's where AI falls short. Empathy, right? Oh my goodness, Brian brought up GPT-0, which is an AI detector. And I think we've got a little bit of discussion about that, but I'll just say real briefly, with all of these AI detectors that are out there, they're not very accurate. They throw false positives and false negatives, and they're going to have to get like much better before I'm starting to get comfortable using them with students. Anyway, I digress. Let's go to conversation number 3. What does responsible AI use look like? And what does irresponsible AI use look like? I think it was easy for us to jump in and make assumptions about artificial intelligence and how it's going to be used. And I think some people started to think that it's just a cheating app. The teachers are like, oh, kids are just going to use this to cheat. Well, it's a tool that's going to be available to everybody, to people who are using it in work and using it in real life and everything. So instead of looking at it as, is it cheating or isn't it cheating, maybe we need to think about what's responsible and what's irresponsible. What should we be doing and what shouldn't we be doing? Because just because we can doesn't mean that we necessarily should. So let's look at a couple of implications. Like, for instance, using AI doesn't necessarily mean, these are some of those myths that I think are starting to come out. And let me know what you think about these in the chat. Using AI doesn't necessarily mean cheating. It doesn't necessarily mean that students are cheating. And actually, on the very next slide, we're going to dive deep into that concept of cheating. It doesn't necessarily mean a lack of thinking either. Sure, we can use it to copy and paste like a prompt or an essay topic or something like that a teacher gives. Student could copy and paste that into an AI assistant, have it spit out an essay, and then just paste it into a document. That is a lack of thinking, but using AI doesn't necessarily mean that. You could use it to gather ideas. You could use it to get feedback. I mean, there's a ton of ways that you can use it. And it also doesn't mean that it's laziness either. It doesn't mean that people who use AI are lazy, because if we're able to get things done that are important to be done, and we can take some of the drudgery and some of the mindlessness out of it, really we're repurposing our time and our effort and our resources into what matters most, So Angie says here, our kids are already using AI, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. So we need to be proactive and teach them how to use it responsibly. Yes, I learned about ChatGPT from my students. Looks like I'm seeing flowers for Wendy. Let's see if I can find her question. If all of our work can be completed almost instantaneously by AI, is that the type of work we need or that we want our students doing? I love that question. And then here's sort of the follow-up question to that. If the kind of work that can be instantaneously created by AI is the kind of work that needs done in the workforce, are we going to need humans to do it? And in that case, do we need to prepare students with the skills to do that kind of work? Now, not everything in our human lives is going to be done by artificial intelligence, but you got to know that, especially in the workforce, if it can be outsourced by artificial intelligence, there's a chance that it probably can. So what Wendy is alluding to here is kind of like the classroom version of that, Oh my goodness, we could go on and on with this. I want to get to all of these comments. This is so good. But I want to dive into this idea of cheating a little bit more. And so this is actually a page in my book. If you flip to page 81, I've learned by now what page it's on. This is the big spectrum on what do we consider cheating and plagiarism anymore. Because I know from the get-go, I know a lot of folks wanted to say, oh, we don't want kids to use AI because it's cheating. There was a high school in Florida that threatened to withhold students from graduation because kids were using artificial intelligence. And so my question is it all cheating if you use artificial intelligence? Because I don't think that is. That's like using the nuance of a sledgehammer, in my opinion. So let's dig into this just a little bit. So what you have on your screen here, and by the way, you're going to get, if you've registered for this webinar, you're going to get a follow-up email after we're done with links to my slides, links to a place where you can get a certificate of completion for professional development credit, and then a link to this video so you can watch it again and again if you want to. So if you want to come back to this slide later, you're going to get a link to these slides. But let's take a look at this and kind of think about, what do we really consider cheating when it comes to artificial intelligence? So what you see here, up at the top of this spectrum, is stuff that is created a lot by artificial intelligence, all the way down to the bottom of the spectrum where it's created a lot by the student. And you'll see that the extremes aren't probably what we want, but it's in the middle. That's where it starts to get interesting. So let's go to the top of this on the AI generated side of things. This says, what happens if a student plugs a prompt given to them by the teacher into artificial intelligence? They copy the response that artificial intelligence spits out to them, and then they submit it to the teacher. No student thinking. Is that cheating? Well, I think we can definitely say that's not what we want. And so if that's the case, let's see if we can find something better at the bottom of the spectrum. Remember, at the bottom here, this is mostly human generated. So what does it look like if a human generates all of the student work in this case? Student wrote all assignment content without consulting artificial intelligence and without consulting the internet at all. Is that cheating? Well, I think we can definitely, even if we say, no, that's not cheating, I think we can definitely say that that's not authentic or representative of the kind of work that students are probably going to do in the workforce or in college or any of that. So if what we don't want is at the top of this spectrum and we don't want is in the middle of this spectrum, it starts to get tricky in the middle. So ask yourself this question. As we go through the rest of these, is this cheating? Is this what you want students to do? So let's go back up here. This is closer to the top of the AI side of the spectrum. So artificial intelligence creates a response to your prompt or your essay topic or whatever. The student reads that essay that the artificial intelligence created. They edit it. They make adjustments to it. They change it so that it fits their voice and what they need to say, and then they submit it. Is that cheating? Let's go to the next one. Now, this is going to be a little less artificial intelligence. The student created multiple AI responses. So maybe it said, create me an essay. Create me another essay that does this differently. Create me another essay that does this a little differently. Create me one that uses more sophisticated language. So they've got all these different versions of the essays. They pick and choose the best parts, the parts that they like the most. They put it together in an essay, they edit it, they adjust it, and they submit it. Is that cheating? See, now there's more and more student thinking and more student work. They're making more decisions as writers there. I'm not telling you what is and what isn't cheating here. You've got to make that decision yourself. But I'm just saying that there's more evidence of student thought and student skill in this. Let's go a little further down. What about student writes out main ideas of things that they want covered in this essay, almost like bullet points. They stick it into an artificial intelligence assistant like ChatGPT. The AI generates a draft, and then it offers feedback on how students can improve. They take that, edit it, adjust it as necessary, submit it to the teacher. Is that cheating? And then finally, we'll get down here to where student consults the internet or AI for ideas, then takes those ideas that they've collected. They write their draft and then they submit it. But AI has been a part of it. Remember how we said we have to come to terms with the fact that AI will have touched lots of student work in the future. So I guess you could ask the question throughout all of this, what kind of work am I okay with students doing? And then let's go, that's question number one right here. Which of these would you consider cheating? Number two, which of these is relevant to our students' future? If we forecast into the future, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years into the future, which of these is relevant to what students are going to be doing? And then here's the kicker. Here's the question that I think is really important. Which of these would you use in your work as an adult? And are you asking students to do anything different than what you do in your work as an adult? And if you are, I think you're going to have to come to terms with the fact that maybe students are going to be doing that exact same kind of thing. Now, when it comes to conversations, I really believe that this is a super important conversation just in general to have with, teacher to teacher, admin, school leaders to teachers, even teacher to student. Students need to be in on this conversation too, because they need to know what responsible and irresponsible looks like. Some of it's subjective. And at least if they know how you view it, they kind of know what zone to operate in, even if they don't agree with it. And, different teachers in different schools may be in different places all over the spectrum. But as long as it's clear to students what they, what they need to be doing, that helps, because then they're not just making decisions in a vacuum, right? Christine says, ask kids where they see themselves on the spectrum at the start of the lesson, like the spectrum that you see on the screen. And then choose a target area for the final product. Personal accountability, exercise ethics, and goal setting. We're talking about it kind of throughout. Oh, Michael's been reading. Nicely done, Michael. So he pulled this. This is actually a quote from my friend Ken Shelton, who I've co-presented with about artificial intelligence. And he saw this chart and he added this question. Substitute the word AI with parent or friend or study partner. How does that change how we look at the work? So instead of the word AI over here, submit that with like a friend or a study partner, because then it starts to feel a little more like teamwork and collaboration and everything. So that's a good question. Judy says we need to rethink the kind of learning culture. Oh, she's speaking my language, learning culture that we create, and realize that many of the assignments and projects we created in the past are no longer relevant, or that at very, very least that they need updates or maybe complete overhauls. No, I totally, totally love that. Mia says the conversations I've led with this graphic have been so amazing. Thank you. And if you're looking at this graphic and you want to be able to use it to help lead some conversations with your students or with your staff or whatever, there's going to be a link in that email that you're going to get that'll take you right to my slides. In fact, I'm going to put a link to a blog post, ditch.link/AI. This is a link to a blog post that I wrote that has lots and lots of stuff related to artificial intelligence. And if you use that link, you should be able to find a version of this graphic as well. So yeah. I love this from Beth. She says, perhaps we could view AI as an additional collaborator. I've heard lots of teachers talking about this, how AI can be kind of like another voice in the conversation. And so, if we're having a class discussion or small group conversations or something, and we want to ask artificial intelligence about, what it can summarize from its data set that can add to the conversation, then it becomes another collaborator. Folks, if you're not paying attention to the gems of knowledge and perspective that Amanda is dropping into the chat, these are great. And, I really feel like she could have probably co-presented with me, especially on the on question number, I think it's question number 5, conversation number 5, where we're going to get into some of this stuff a little bit. She says some of it is upholding the status quo and gatekeeping, which is an equity problem. She's already talking about bias and everything. Like these are some legit concerns that we're going to have to deal with as well. All right, we're halfway through our conversations. I just realized I needed to stop and take a breath, because I've been kind of talking nonstop through all of this. Let's go to number 4. How can AI save teachers time? I really believe that this is a big one. And I would love it if you started throwing into the chat some of the ways that artificial intelligence can save you and other educators time. Because everywhere I go, it seems like, whenever I go to a school and do a workshop with the teachers, or if I go into my wife's school and I talk to her coworkers, or if I'm at a teacher conference and I'm talking with other teachers, it seems like everybody talks about the same thing. They don't say it explicitly, but it's in their responses and in their conversation. If I had the time to do X, Y, and Z, things would be better. Oh, I'm just so strapped for time. I don't have time to do that. Oh, I really wish that I could do this thing. It's all about time, isn't it? I really believe that time is the most precious currency that we get as educators. Of course, this is aside from the whole compensation and teacher pay conversation. That's a conversation for a different day. But if we're talking about what we're able to do in the classroom, time is the big thing. And so if we can use artificial intelligence to do things that used to take us maybe 20 minutes, and we can do it in 8. It used to take us 10 minutes, and we can do it in 4. All of those saved minutes start to stack up. And so then we get to ask a question that we never get to ask. What am I going to do with that time? Am I going to sink it into a lesson or an activity or a unit that I think my students are going to love, or provide more feedback or different feedback to my students? Or, no shame on this one either, am I going to get out the door at a reasonable time, right? I mean, if that's what artificial intelligence does for us, is it lets us get through the things that we need to do so that we're spending less time outside of our contracted hours, and we're able to sink that time into working on us and putting it towards the things that matter the most. Like, that's the good stuff, you know? So what can we use it for? I'm going to start jumping into some of these comments already. Like, I use ChatGPT to create practice questions for the Praxis CS 5651. So yeah, practice questions. That's one right there. Kristen says it can refine and polish what I come up with. I love that. I love students that use Google searches to answer questions. Does this help them retrieve the information later, or is it just giving answers? We need today's students to be tomorrow's inventors. I think Lori was getting to another point there, but I see where she's coming from there. Amanda says, creating differentiated lessons. Yes, if we need to make adjustments to meet students where they are. Used it to help write objectives from standards for a course I'm writing content for. I obviously need to proofread it, but it was a huge time saver. Yeah, like if you see something as drudgery and like mindless paperwork. Now, Caitlin, I'm not saying that you necessarily feel that way about writing objectives, but I have felt that way about those kinds of things, and aligning things to standards and stuff. Like the things that don't make the best use of who we are as human teachers. You got to ask ourselves, like, what makes us special as human teachers? And if something is not on that list, you ask yourself, can I outsource some of it to artificial intelligence? Generating innovative ideas for different ways to help student learning. Just asking the AI assistant, what are some different ways that I can do this? Jeremy's got a list. He came with a list: lesson plans, IEPs, student recommendations, emails, newsletters, reading quizzes, adjusting the Bloom's level of questions. All of those are great. I tell you what, when this is all over with, like, we need to all go scan up and down through these chat comments, because they are fantastic. And so this is kind of like my new mantra. This is like my new slogan. AI is my new teaching assistant. Have you ever dreamed? I've done this before. You know, teaching high school Spanish, and I dreamed, what would it be like if the school hired me an assistant, somebody that could help me grade, somebody that could help me do some of those like menial tasks, that could help me design slide decks and, you know, summarize information and create teaching materials. Guess what? It's kind of here, you know? How about this one from Sergio? Let me pull this one up real quick. Help write sub-plans. Yeah, that one's fantastic. Lindsay says, a teacher in my district had to alter her current lesson plan to have a Dungeons and Dragons theme, and it was awesome. I love that. That's fantastic. I mean, really, sometimes it's just only limited by your own imagination. Here are some of the things that I see it doing. Lesson planning. Again, first draft of that lesson plan, you know. I had some dude come at me on social media when I was talking about, you know, suggesting that maybe artificial intelligence could help us with lesson planning. And he's like, I never want my own kid to get taught by artificial intelligence, to be taught by lesson plans that are created by artificial intelligence. And I was like, dude, do you realize that teachers use the internet all the time to get ideas? They sometimes buy things right off of teachers, pay teachers, and turn around and start teaching with them. Like, we use stuff from all different sources. And guess where the data set is? Guess what? Where the data, or what the data set is made of that creates things for artificial intelligence. A lot of the same stuff that's right out there on the internet. So no shame in using it to make a first draft. You're the one, as the educator, though, that gets to figure out whether it's useful and helpful, and if it's something that you want to actually use. Ask it to write discussion questions. Ask it to do grading and feedback for you. If you give it like a rubric and some guidance, and then you start pasting student work into it, it'll analyze it and it'll give feedback. Now, is it the kind of feedback that you would give and that's aligned with what you've been teaching your students? That's up to you to decide. IEPs, right? There's all of that paperwork. And if it's pulling teachers away from doing the good work that they need to do with their students, maybe this can free them up for some of that. Leveled text. If you give artificial intelligence a text and you say, I want this on a different lexile, I want this with more sophisticated vocabulary, I want you to use certain vocabulary words inside of it, it can make different variations for you. It can create student exemplars. It can help you answer email. It can help you to do all of that monotonous paperwork, right? So like all of that stuff. Viviana also says it can generate links to useful resources, just more specific and greater scale. So yeah, any of this stuff, these are the kinds of things it can do. Now, again, if you want to have a conversation about this, if you want to have a conversation about how it can save time, here are some questions you can ask. Ask yourself, what parts of my work are not central, we talked about this earlier, to what makes me special as a human teacher? Can AI help me do those things faster or easier? Number two, what makes me special as a human teacher that I must keep sacred, that I must always be the one that does it as a human and not artificial intelligence? And are there things AI can create a first draft for that I can adjust and modify to use the way that I want? So let's keep moving. Let's go to number 5. What should we be concerned about? There are lots of things that I think we should be concerned about and that we need to be aware of when it comes to artificial intelligence. Because sometimes the stuff that it cranks out to us is inaccurate. Sometimes it's biased. Sometimes it's lacking on a full set of information. Because really what artificial intelligence does is it takes its precious data set that it's been trained on and that it's studied, and it tries to make its best percentage guess on what the right answer is or on how it should respond. And sometimes it doesn't get it right. And sometimes, here's the thing that it probably doesn't want you to know. Well, it's artificial intelligence. It's a machine. I'm getting ahead of myself. But still, the thing that you got to be aware of is that sometimes if it doesn't know the answer, it'll guess. And it guesses pretty confidently. Like, we wouldn't know that it's guessing. And so these are some of the issues. Let's go to a couple of the things that we need to be worried about. Number 1, keep an eye out for bias. So for instance, a lot of the information in the data set is taken from the kinds of resources that we can find. And we start to realize that the resources that are available do not create an equal playing field for, representation from all different types of people, from different perspectives and from different backgrounds and everything. Case in point, I was doing a presentation at the ASCD conference with Ken Shelton, who I just mentioned earlier. And he said that there was a teacher who had done who had asked artificial intelligence to generate a list of women that students could do reports on for Women's History Month. And so it generated this big long list. But then they started to adjust the prompts, and it said that the next thing they asked for were it wanted to know. I'm trying to remember the word that he used there. These were like controversial women or radical women. I think that's the word. And asked for radical women. Guess what the list looked like? Lots of women of color. All of a sudden are the radical women that they suggest. So then they go on the other side of things and they ask for a list of traditional women. Lots of white women there. And so again, you start to notice these things. And so does this mean that we should never use artificial intelligence because it exists? I mean, that's up to you, but I think we just got to be aware of it. We've got to be aware of what it's spitting out, what it's saying, and how it could be biased, and what's in the data set. You got to keep an eye out for hallucinations. Hallucinations, that's the term that we use when the artificial intelligence doesn't quite know the answer and it guesses what it thinks the answer is supposed to be. And so if something looks a little bit off, it might be a good idea to fact check it. You can even ask follow-up questions to the artificial intelligence to find out where it got its information. And then, of course, we got to look for gaps too. If you think of a data set that artificial intelligence is trained on, think of it like a library. You walk into the building and it's this great big library and it's full of all of these books. Is all of the information that's ever been known to the entire history of humanity in that library? It might look like it, you might feel like it, but it isn't. And so there are gaps, there are missing perspectives, there's missing information, and we've got to realize that artificial intelligence doesn't have all of the answers. So, I was going to throw another Amanda quote in here, which is why we should be asking students to critically think before believing everything in print. Yes, and which is also why I think media literacy and digital literacy are so important, and digital citizenship, and all of those things. Key equity question here, and someone alluded to this earlier, and I wanted to bring it back up. What happens if we don't model responsible AI use? That's what makes me wonder, what happens if a student doesn't ever see an adult modeling how this is used in everyday life and modeling the problems that they have with it or the concerns that they see and how they navigate all of those things. When they get out of high school, when they get into different spheres of their life, when they get out into the workforce and other students have had it modeled for them, what kind of an advantage are they going to have? This makes me think of when New York City public schools banned ChatGPT across the board. Now, as with any ban, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be, forever and ever and ever. But it started to make me think, what about those kids that never get to see how it's used? And the teachers that don't get to use it too. But, there's that equity question. Isn't it going to put them at a disadvantage if they don't get to see how it should be used well? So these are some of my concerns. And I love how, a lot of the things that you all have been putting into the comments, like Judy says, it makes up some citations and quotes based on what someone might have said. Informational literacy skills need to be developed in teachers and students. Yes, absolutely. Aaron says AI has cognitive costs, can make us lazier, lessens critical thinking skills, and may slow learning across many areas. So if we start to use it for things that we've used our own human brains for, then, we're not developing those skills ourselves. All right, let's go to conversation number 6, our final conversation of the day. And this is an important one. What does the future look like for our students? Because that's really, to me, that is kind of like the North Star that I want to orient everything that I'm doing toward. I want to make sure that what I'm doing helps prepare students for what their future is going to look like. And let's do a little activity together. Picture, if you would, a 10-year-old student. You might have a 10-year-old at home, right? I've got a 13-year-old at home and a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I think about them in these terms a lot. But imagine that 10-year-old student. That 10-year-old student is going to graduate high school in 8 years. And if college and university still is the same model in 8 years that it is right now, that's a big if. They might graduate college in 12 years. So you've got to ask yourself, what skills are going to be essential to them when that happens? But then you've also got to ask yourself, what is AI going to be capable of when that happens? Because artificial intelligence, as we know it right now, like ChatGPT, GPT-4, Bard, and Bing, and all of the other places that AI shows up, it's going to be 12 years smarter and 12 years more developed when this happens. What's it going to be capable of? And so how do we even prepare for something like that? To me, I think it's important that we teach with our tomorrow glasses. I think that's how we do it. Because a lot of us look at a new technological disruption like ChatGPT and some of these AI models. We look at them through today glasses. And today glasses are based on things that we know to be true, and data and lived experiences in the past and best practices and things that we can read about that have already happened, have already been analyzed. It's more of the concrete here and now. And we look at something new and we go, ooh, oh, I don't like that. Oh, that doesn't fit with what I do in class. That doesn't fit with this activity. That feels like cheating. That feels wrong. See, we're looking at it through today glasses. The problem is that our students don't get the privilege of looking at their future through today glasses, because they have to look at it through tomorrow glasses. And using tomorrow glasses is not easy. It's messy and complicated. Looking at our teaching through tomorrow glasses involves predictions, prognostications, forecasting the future. And it means that we're going to get it wrong sometimes too. It means that we're going to have to look out into the future and try to figure out what students are going to need. And we're going to have to try to adapt our class to meet that. And sometimes we're not going to get it right and we're going to fail. And so one of the most important things that we can do, I think, to teach with our tomorrow glasses is to be willing to accept imperfect answers right now. But we teachers like to get it right. We don't like to be wrong. We don't like imperfect answers, right? And so we've got to be willing to take a step, and we've got to be willing to try to figure out what it is that these students are going to need, and we're going to have to take action on it, knowing that even if we get it wrong, we can still adjust as we go. Because if we keep teaching with our today glasses, our students are going to get left behind. They don't stand a chance to be prepared for the future that they're going to have. So I encourage you to not look at the way that the world is now and what you feel now and what you do now. We've got to teach with our tomorrow glasses, you know? Aaron says the future depends on who owns AI. If it remains amongst the people, students will be able to explore and learn. However, if the government seizes control or becomes hyper-financialized, who knows? Yep, that is definitely a concern. We have Judy says today's AI is like the Commodore 64. I like to joke that it's kind of like the MySpace of artificial intelligences, but I like the Commodore 64 as well. That's a really good one. Here's the geek teacher who has been throwing great things in since the very beginning. It was one of the first ones that checked in the chat today. He says future casting is difficult, but it won't look like today. AI is going to be built into everything. Potential self-driving cars, what will be automated or not. There's the jobs. I mean, just all of that stuff. Jill identifies the struggle with artists. Take the imperfect and be created. Move forward. Tracy says, my 8-year-old daughter's been watching this with me, and she finds it really exciting. Well, cool. Tracy's 8-year-old daughter, thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this. She wonders if she might one day have an AI friend. I bet she'll have the opportunity, right? Kristen says, in my education career 2.0, I want to be a domain-specific GPT prompt engineer. What advice do you have for me? Start practicing and start learning from all over the place, because by golly, from what I read about prompt engineering as a career, it's going to pay a lot better than most of us get as educators. So, okay, guess what? I have a bonus conversation for you. And that is, how can we learn more about AI in education? And so I want to go through with you, some of the resources that I really love right now if you want to level up your understanding about AI, about what it means in education, and about what you can do going forward. So I wanted to tell you real quick about my new book, AI for Educators. I have a copy of it right here. This book, I wrote this book for busy educators who are just trying to understand all of this artificial intelligence stuff and what it means in the classroom. I wanted to translate artificial intelligence for the classroom, for teachers, so that you would understand some of the implications that it's going to have on the classroom, the adjustments that you can make, what it can do to save you time, and how you can prepare kids for the future. You know, those are the kinds of questions that I think we need to be trying to figure out. And so instead of writing something super high tech or something that's hard to read or something that's going to take you forever, this book, people that have read it say that it's a page turner. They say that it's readable and understandable. And that's what I was shooting for. If you want a quick snippet of what the book looks like, we've got the welcome that kind of introduces you to the idea of it. We start to imagine what the AI integrated classroom is going to look like what is it going to look like in the near future in our classes and some of the implications. Shifting to accommodate a world with AI. So like, what are some small shifts that you can make in your own classroom right away? I call that the break glass in case of emergency chapter. Then we get into ways that AI can support teaching and learning. There's lots of examples there. We get a whole chapter about what are cheating and plagiarism. If that graphic and that conversation we had earlier was your thing and you want to go deeper, there's a whole chapter on that. Acting responsibly in an AI integrated world, this is where we start to get to some of the concerns and some of the ethics and that kind of thing. And then we get to preparing students for an AI integrated world. This is the future thinking, the future casting. What can we do to prepare students for their future? And then taking bold steps for the future wraps it all up. And so some things that folks have said about the book that I'll tell you real quick. And by the way, if you want to get a copy of the book, ditch.link/AI book will take you right there so you can get it in paperback or Kindle ebook. They say how he always finds a way to make the newest technology trends easy to understand and even easier to implement. Easy, quick, practical read for educators who want to remain informed. A lot of food for thought, fast read. That sounds like your kind of thing. You might check out the book. Like I said, it's available in paperback and Kindle ebook. So a second resource that I wanted to tell you about just real quick is I've got an online course coming out right now called AI for Educators, and it actually starts next week. So here are a couple things to know about it. It's a 4-week course. It's going to have some 1-hour live video sessions, 1 each week, total of 4. If this webinar today has captured your interest and you've enjoyed it and you want to dive deeper into AI with me for the next 4 weeks, this online course might be for you. It's got tons of helpful resources in each weekly module that you can access and hang on to. It's got interactive discussion forums where we can continue to bat ideas around together as participants in the course. You can get a certificate of completion for 5 hours of professional development credit, and then you get lifetime access to everything. The video replays of the live streams and all of the downloadable resources, all of the copy and assign templates. If you start to look at some of the stuff that you get in it, there is a ton. And so we've got infographics, we've got templates that you can make a copy of and use, some of which are activities you can do with your students. We've got 3 whole free ebooks, including AI in the classroom, ChatGPT, getting started. There's an entire unit on doing artificial intelligence with students. So like how artificial intelligence works. If you want to teach students about it, we've got an entire unit, like the kind of thing you'd go out on Teachers Pay Teachers to go buy, and you get it with the course. And then of course there are interactive live streams just like this, where you'll get to hang out with me and get to ask and answer questions and discuss things just like we have right here. If you're watching this right now, you get a special discount on the course if you want to sign up for it. If you register in the next 24 hours, basically through the end of the day tomorrow, you can get 10% off if you use the link that's on your screen. And so that's ditch.link/AI web. That's like AI webinar, but I shortened it so it's a little different. If you go to ditch.link/AI web, you can get 10% off the course right now. So some questions real quick about the course. Shelley asked, is the book in the course? No, sadly it's not, but some of the things that we talk about in the book, we also will talk about in the course. Debbie, can you offer this in the summer too? Yes. We're going to have a summer cohort and a back to school cohort. But the one that's going on right now is the spring cohort. Maria has already registered, which is super cool. So I got one more thing that I want to show you real fast. If you do professional development and you're interested in getting like a full day workshop, a virtual workshop, the Tomorrow Glasses keynote speech, breakout sessions, if you want to get bulk courses for your teachers, or even a book study of the AI for Educators book, there is the email right there. I'm going to put the email into the chat. That's hello@ditchthattextbook.com, and you can get information about all of these things. Pam says, what time would this be running, which I assume is the course? It starts next week, which is April 17th, and then it just runs for the next 4 weeks. And it ends kind of, I think, the second week of May. But all of the live streams are on Wednesday evenings. And so you'll be able to go join those. And if you can't join them, you can go watch them on the video replay also. Let me tell you this. If you missed the 10% discount and you already registered, email me, matt@ditchthattextbook.com. Let me see what I can do for you. I just dropped my email into the chat. Okay. So in summary, look, we're right down to the end here. In fact, I'm going to make this nice and big. If you're a screenshot type of person or a take a picture type of person, these are the 6 conversations. What is AI and what can and can't it do? That's number 1. How will teaching and learning change as AI expands? That's number 2. What does responsible AI use look like? And what does irresponsible use look like? Number 3, how can AI save teachers time? What should we be concerned about? And finally, what does the future look like for our students? So there are all 6 of your conversations. If you have any questions for me, I'll kind of take those as we wrap up. So drop any of those in. If you asked a question earlier and I didn't get to it and you'd like me to get to it, I'll try to cover some of those as we wrap up and as some of you kind of finish up. What happens now? Now that the webinar is over, I've got this thing scheduled to go out in 24 minutes. An email from me that will have a link to the video replay. Spoiler alert, it's the same link that you're using to watch the video right now. If you want to go rewatch it, if you want to share the video with somebody else, you can just use this same link. And as soon as our broadcast finishes, it converts to a video replay. In your email, you'll get a link to my slides for this presentation. Everything that you've seen on the screen, you can get access to as well. And then I'm also offering a certificate of completion for professional development credit. If you watch the whole webinar, you can get 1 hour of PD credit as well. And then also remember, if you want to get signed up for that online course, the discount ends in about 24 hours at the end of the day on Friday. So remember to use that link, ditch.link/AIweb, to go sign up for that course. And then that way you and I and everybody else will be able to, discuss and interact through this, this course the same way that we have tonight in the webinar. So Aaron says, stoked about the course and excited to find some peeps to collab with. There are going to be lots of peeps there. I think this is one of the big questions. Michael, don't you need to be sleeping? Aren't you like on the other side of the planet and it's sort of like a crazy hour right now? Michael asked so many great ideas in the chat. Can we get a copy of these? Well, the chat will still be available in the YouTube video after the video is over with. So you can always hit that link and go right back in and go read back through the chat if you want to. Okay, inquiring minds wanted to know. He says it's 1 p.m. so it's not that crazy of a time. Tessa asked, when you all use ChatGPT for writing things like email, do you explicitly give credit to ChatGPT? If we're expecting students to cite their sources, shouldn't we be transparent about our use of AI? I'm so glad that you brought this up. This is something I didn't get to in my presentation that I think is important. So when ChatGPT creates something, it's not any one person's intellectual property. See, if you look at the definition of intellectual property right now, intellectual property can only be owned by humans. That's why plagiarism checkers like Turnitin, they're all dependent upon human created work. It's humans passing off work as their own that they didn't do. And so in this case, the stuff that's created by ChatGPT is not owned by artificial intelligence because bots can't own intellectual property. So whose is it? I actually asked ChatGPT this once, and basically it said, well, it's not mine. And so I said, okay, well, if I want to cite it, what can I do? And it said, well, if you want to cite it, just say that it came from ChatGPT. Now, here's the thing that I've learned even further beyond that. The responses that are created through AI assistants like ChatGPT are basically like in the public domain. If you study anything about copyright and, citing your sources correctly and everything. When things are in the public domain, it means that nobody officially owns them and has rights over them. And so, it's kind of like when artwork and music and books get to be more than about 100 years old, their copyright wears off and then they go into the public domain and anybody can use them for anything, with or without citation. And it's okay if you use it without citation because that's the way that it's intended to be. So that's a good question. Now, does it feel like it's in your voice when you write it or whenever you use it? I would say if you adjust it and it feels like it's in your voice and it's something that you would say anyway, it's yours because it doesn't belong to it doesn't belong to the artificial intelligence. Viviana asked, is the course the kind that I have to be present every week or can I do it in a self-paced? Because of the time difference. It's 3 a.m. Oh my goodness, bless your heart for being here at 3 a.m. Goodness gracious. Yes, you can do it as a self-paced course. The only thing that's really synchronous or like live is the live stream, the broadcast kind of like this. And you can just watch the video replays if you want to. There's going to be this, this discussion forum where we'll be able to bounce comments back and forth with each other. You can do that anytime. And so all of the resources will be available. Really, all of this stuff you can do self-paced if you want to. The only thing that you really do synchronous and live is if you want to be part of the broadcast. So there's Todd, always a treat, Matt. You changed my entire teaching style with your first ditch and your presentations. And oh my goodness, that was years ago that I got to see Todd. I remember that. I got to see Todd at a workshop in Anderson, Indiana. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining. So what else do we have that are questions? Oh, Cecile makes a good point. She says, you can usually tell if the student is using AI because it's not in their voice. And see, I would even argue that it's a real sort of future ready skill and a life skill to help students understand what makes it uniquely their voice and what makes it sound like them so that they can adjust it. So yeah, good stuff. All right. Lots and lots of good comments. Once this is all over with, I'm going to have to go back through and reread all of the really good things in here. Another question real quick from Renee. She says, any ideas on how to educate parents? Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Because there are probably some that are already set in their beliefs about artificial intelligence. I think really, to me, the big thing is if you want to get to the heart of parents, you start talking about their kids' future and making sure that they're prepared. And if they understand this is going to be out there and it's going to continue to develop when their kids get older and get out into the workforce, like all we want to do is just help their kids be ready for this. And so we can't continue to do things the way that we have if the future is going to look so different. And if this is going to be such a big part of it. So that's one thing that I definitely would do when it comes to talking to parents is just helping them to understand how things are going to look different and how your class can help give their kid kind of like a unique advantage and a unique perspective on this that's going to serve them. So let's see. We've got one other quick question. Larry Bush says, will ChatGPT be able to teach reading? That's a good question. I mean, artificial intelligence is learning how to do lots of things. And there's probably lots of information in its data set about best practices on literacy and helping kids to read. Right now, we've got to know what questions to ask it and what things to have it do because, it's not human. We were talking about that earlier. It's not artificial general intelligence where it's kind of like as smart as a human. But we can definitely use it in our quest to help kids be able to read well also. Susan has a left field question. I love those kinds of questions. Matt, what tool are you using to create the chat shout-outs? Does doing such create the top chat? Okay. So 2 answers to that. Number one, it doesn't actually integrate with the top chat. That's all something that just happens through YouTube. But the thing that I'm using to pop all of this in is a tool called StreamYard, which you can find at streamyard.com. It's just what I use to make YouTube live streams. And so it has, it's the thing that I've used to switch to my to switch to my slides and to switch to me full screen and then to go full screen with, to do all of those things. You can also use it to display banners kind of like this. So yeah, it's got lots of things that it can do. So StreamYard.com, there's a free version. I use the paid version because I use it so much, but yeah, that's what I use. Stormy brings up a point and says, I think the real conversation is, why are we expecting our students to produce something that can be replicated? Yes. Where is the creation in regurgitation? This is what educators need to discuss. I totally agree with that. Like, if we're continuing to ask students to do assignments that can be replicated by artificial intelligence, we've got to start asking ourselves hard questions about how much we're really preparing kids for. So, okay, I think we've covered a lot of things here. I'm going to do this one last question, then we're going to wrap this up. John says, so blatantly copying something from ChatGPT and submitting it as your work technically isn't plagiarism because ChatGPT isn't human. Okay, I've been thinking this and like subtly saying this for a long time, but it's really true, which is something that we're going to have to wrap our brains around. John was paying attention here, because I just said anything that you generate through ChatGPT is in the public domain. It's not owned by anything. No one has copyright over it. It's not anybody's intellectual property. So technically, if a student copied a response, pasted it into a doc and submitted it, and the teacher said, that's plagiarism, technically it's not, like he said, because it's not any one person's intellectual property. Now, it definitely isn't what we want. It's not what we want students to do, but it is something that we're going to have to grapple with. And I think instead of scolding students for quote unquote plagiarizing, which it kind of isn't, instead of doing that, we need to have those conversations about, what does responsible, ethical use of AI look like? How should we be using this? Because if their employer in the future is able to draft something, stick it into a document or on a website or in an email or whatever, give it to a client, and they don't need that worker to do it for them, then all of a sudden they become less valuable and less sort of relevant to the workplace. So it becomes the bigger question of, how can we add value and make ourselves as relevant to work and to humanity and to society as we can? We're getting kind of deep and philosophical again, right? So, okay, we're going to wrap this up. I think now is probably a good time to do that. I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation in the chat, and I hope you all have gotten a chance to, bounce around and chat with each other. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And also remember that discount in the online course, you got 24 hours to claim that. You're going to go to that link, ditch.link/AI web, to get signed up and claim that 10% off. And then the course starts next week. It's right here. So thank you so much for being a part of this webinar and for joining and for interacting in the chat. I had a blast hanging out with all of you. I do hope that you take the course and that we get to continue this conversation and that we get to continue having these chats. I'm looking forward to it. My name is Matt Miller. I'm thankful for the chance to get to spend time with you tonight. Take care, and hopefully I'll get to see you.